It's all tied up, so let's find out which Flowers adaptation is overall better by looking at the final factor, best story. This is Story for the Win. I think most people can agree that telling a coming-of-age story in a film is no easy task. I mean, it's basically the outline of someone's character changing throughout a course of time, either in their strengths, their flaws, or even their sexual orientation. So how great of an impact it leaves really depends on how you portray the content and how much detail you choose to go into it. But unfortunately, there was one major flaw with both adaptations that kept them from fully embracing the spirit of the original novel. They're both way too short. The book itself wasn't a doorstop or anything, but it indeed had some very complex character developments. So with the same approximate running time of an hour and a half, fully capturing the spirit of the book was pretty much wishful thinking from the start on both films' ends. But how do they try, you may ask? Well, both of their attempts are indeed very different. The '87 film takes most of the key plot points in the story, sandwiches in some new stuff here and there, and paces the movie very slowly to make sure it hits that 90-minute mark. The 2014 film, on the other hand, tries to fit as much of the original book's plot as it can in 90 minutes, but to do so it has to move at an incredibly accelerated pace, usually only devoting the amount of time absolutely necessary to each sequence. The downside to this is, it's a bit hard for the new version to have a powerful mood or atmosphere throughout. Not that there was none at all, but I feel it could have come off as much stronger if it had a longer running time. The original, despite backing off of the taboo topics, is able to build a very suspenseful and aggressive tone in many scenes, and its slower pace greatly contributes to it. Like, take the sequence in the original where Olivia catches the kids sleeping in the same bed. Instead of coming right at them and giving them a huge beatdown, she just slowly walks towards them with this casual expression on her face, while the audience and the kids have no idea what the hell she's gonna do. Is she gonna whip them? Is she gonna cut them open? No, that would be too lenient for such an abhorrent act, so she ends up knocking over the sentimental music box from their father. Or how about the sequence where Christopher's escaped being locked in the staircase while Olivia taught Cathy a little lesson? We aren't fully sure what she did to her in this sequence, and neither is Christopher, so the suspense is terrible as he slowly approaches the bathroom door, not knowing what to expect. And there we find Cathy, crying about her new bad haircut. Moments like these really leave a strong impact in the movie, but the problem is, that's really what the slow moments are used for. Instead, a good portion of the slow scenes are just montages of characters just walking around, staring at each other, their surroundings, and some overly long zoom-ins or tracking shots that lead to something with little to no relevance or something that we already knew perfectly well, all serving as filler to make sure the movie hits that appropriate running mark. This takes time away from the more important aspects, like the character developments and a better look into their motivations and relationships with one another. The Lifetime version knew that the coming-of-age aspect of the story was what was the most interesting, and it would have to sacrifice the strongest mood possible to portray it in just 90 minutes. And to their credit, I think they did a pretty good job. Keep in mind that Cathy and Christopher changed far more throughout the story than just developing feelings for one another. They have to go through puberty, have their innocence and trust of their mother destroyed, learn to be parents, and to achieve all that in 90 minutes is pretty dang impressive. Not that there was none of that in the original. Well, there was none of the incest anyway, aside from a few implications, but we do see a bit of the development into less innocence and more independence, but these scenes are often pushed to the side for more pointless montages. And again, this prevents certain plot points from being fully explained. For instance, the only thing we know about Corinne's past in the original is that she eloped with her uncle and got disinherited for it. Details like Corinne's lack of skills due to her never attending college, or the huge credit debt that she and her late husband were in, are never addressed in the movie. So a combination of that, and updating the story from the sexist late 50s to the progressive late 80s, makes it seem a bit weird that the family would be left completely penniless when the father died. It's also never established that Corinne and her father used to have a close relationship before their falling out, which Olivia was jealous of. The scenes of them bonding strongly imply this, but I still think it would have been better to establish this prior. Corinne's murder plot also has some major inconsistencies. Her motivation seems to be the same as in the book, namely that if anyone finds out that she duped her pop about not having any kids, she loses her inheritance, which the kids discover near the end through a will which was dated 2 months ago. But Corinne starts poisoning the cookies on only the children's second day in captivity, well before the will was written or her father had gotten back on good terms with her. So did she happen to be a psychic and know that that condition would be put in the will? Was it just a coincidence that the condition got put in and she was poisoning them just for a kick? Guess what? It's never explained. And there's also some things like, why did Olivia have the children brought into the house in broad daylight where they could easily be caught as opposed to the dead of night when the staff was asleep? Or why did she have 4 graves dug in the open to bury the kids' bodies? Wouldn't it seem pretty obvious what she was up to if someone came across them? But those are just picky details, I can't complain at heart about them. And to be fair, the Lifetime version has some plot holes too, and that was kind of inevitable if it was going to tell a story this complex in such a short period of time. Like, it never mentions the clause about Corinne losing the money if it's discovered that she ever had children, or directly reveals any motivation for her poisoning the kids. The closest we get is that we see some resentment building up in her after the kids finally call her out for all the crap she's put them through. And in the very next scene, the donuts start coming up. So was she driven to murder them just because they were naggy? That's a pretty stupid motivation for murder. And like said before, the Lifetime version seems to follow suit of the original by having John the butler be aware of the children's existence and serve as a watchman for Olivia. But this isn't revealed until the very end of the movie, has literally no build-up or foreshadowing whatsoever, and is glanced over immediately afterwards. Again, it could have worked great if done sooner, but it was way too late now. But again, the new version has a little more grace because that was part of the price it had to pay to capture the character development journey to the best of its ability. And when said journeys into controversial areas like incest, it is very important to get it right. As many of you may know, the original film actually tried to keep the incest scenes between Cathy and Christopher in the movie, but they were cut after test audiences whined. But the reason why they whined was because the character development that Cathy and Christopher go through to reach that bizarre point was too simplistic. It was certainly well executed. Louise Fletcher's terrifying performance and the suspenseful slow scenes really give the film a very cutthroat and abrasive atmosphere that really makes you feel for the children. But a good portion of the original story consists of just the original main plot points, with the rest being either completely left out or paraphrased through narration. A movie's atmosphere is good, but if the story itself is too weak, people won't find it worth the shock value you're conveying through it. The Lifetime version knew it had to get the coming-of-age aspect just right to get people engaged in the taboo topics. We really feel bad for the children in the original, but not to the point where most people are going to accept them forming an incestuous relationship with one another. And that really is too bad, because like said before, the original has some major advantages over the remake, or even the original book for that matter. The grandmother and the mansion are both much more of a legit threat and obstacle for the children in the story. The background characters are given more to do with the plot, it has a pretty spooky and gothic musical score, and some moments that are absolutely terrifying, and some moments that are hilariously campy. Even the altered ending of Corinne getting hanged is not so bad when you really think about it. Keep in mind that there were no follow-ups to this film, so would you want Corinne to just ultimately end up getting away with her actions? I wouldn't. But again, the story is too underdeveloped, so it's not able to reach that same level of fascination that the original book had. The remake was definitely not the flawless adaptation most were expecting, but it keeps the focus where it should be, so it much better embraces the coming-of-age story that has fascinated and disgusted readers for over 40 years. Point goes to the new, which means that the ultimate winner is the New Flowers adaptation.
How could you do this to us?